I am Javon Denua. I will just go over a few tips with you on how to navigate and view tonight's webinar. If you hover your mouse over your screen, you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner a box that has 9 boxes within it. From there, you can choose speaker view, which allows you to see just the person talking, or gallery view, which gives you a broader range of the speaker as well as the moderators. We want to inform you that tonight's webinar is being recorded to share with future audiences. So please keep in mind that any comments or questions may be visible in the future to the public. With that said, we do encourage you to utilize the Q&A section that you'll find through the Zoom platform at the very bottom middle section of your screen. Likewise, if you are viewing this through Facebook Live, you can utilize the comment section to ask your questions. We have moderators in both to help out with Q&A. We will allow time at the end, again, for your questions and answers. And along with myself, we also have my colleagues helping to moderate. Shirley Burks.
Hi.
Ariana Huggett.
Hello.
And Kara Poznansky is holding it down on Facebook Live. Concluding today's meeting, we will also follow up with you all to provide resources and materials that are shared throughout today's presentation, along with any additional UWM information. Now, the moment we've all been waiting for. Tonight's presenter, Patricia Clason, is a professional speaker, coach, trainer, and consultant. She's done a ton of work for us at UW School of Continuing Ed. She continues to work with corporations and universities, and she's been doing this work for over 30+ years. Her expertise and focus are in the field of trauma and emotional intelligence. We are extremely pleased and excited to have Patricia join us this evening. And without further ado, Patricia, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Javon. So I will be using a PowerPoint during the first part of the webinar, where I'll be giving you information, and then I'll return face-to-face full screen while we do our Q&A after the webinar original information section is over. So in order to do that, I need to share my screen. So this is a little bit awkward here, but bear with me as I make this happen. There we go, and now you should be seeing the PowerPoint full screen and seeing our faces somewhere on the screen off to the side or across the top. So thank you everyone for coming to be with us this evening. This webinar was something that was given to me as an inspiration to want to share with our community about the idea of post-traumatic growth. Because I do so much teaching and training in the field of trauma, I've been very aware that this time of safer at home and the COVID crisis is a time that can create post-traumatic stress disorder and other issues for people in the mental health area. And so I thought it might be nice to offer to the community some resources for growth, as opposed to looking at the bad things that might happen, that we can look at how we can turn this into something positive, something valuable, and something rewarding for all of us. So Safer at Home is likely to last for a few weeks and more, as we've already been here for about 3 weeks now. And well, even once we begin to mingle a bit more, there are still going to be a lot of issues that will be confronting us. So we're being asked to do physical distancing, as you all know, the 6 feet apart, and people should stay in their homes. And so we don't get to get close to people. We don't get to share hugs. We're not sharing handshakes. And so there's this physical space that's going on. There's also an emotional distancing that's happening as a result of all of this. Even though we might be connecting like we are tonight via Zoom or Facebook Live, or we can call people on the telephone and talk with them, we still have an emotional distancing, that feeling like we're closed off in some way. And that can actually get as severe as a feeling of abandonment if people aren't making enough of that other kinds of emotional connection. We are also all constantly under the threat of infection that could lead to death. And that level of fear of a physical illness is something we haven't known as intensely in this country since the early 1900s. And so many of us have grown up without any fear of that kind of deep threat. We also have economic distress. Many people are not working. People who are working have additional expenses and issues going on in their economic world. We're looking at an economy that has been slowed down considerably in many ways, and many people are fearing for even, where am I going to find food? There's also, for folks who aren't working, who are used to working, perhaps a feeling of not being valuable because we're not contributing, we're just sitting at home. Not everybody can work from home. Some people just simply are not working. Unemployment records are through the roof in terms of numbers of people who are currently unemployed and don't have something that they're doing valuably in the world. And then we have also the, excuse me, the danger of overwork, and physical danger of illness and infection for frontline and essential workers. And so there's all these stressors coming together, and the mental health impact of these conditions can in fact be traumatic, not just difficult, not just challenging, but truly traumatic. Bessel van der Kolk, who's one of the leading researchers and experts in the field of trauma, tells us that our core sense of safety comes from being connected to others. And when we don't have that connection, we lose some of that sense of safety and support. And we begin to start to fracture, to start to lose some of who we are, and to have a very difficult time interacting in the world. Now, there's a name for the phenomena that's happening to us all right now. When people are under duress, prolonged exposure to stress, what happens is that there can be an actual anxiety disorder that can result from that prolonged exposure. Severe work-related stress or continual bullying, or in our case, the whole COVID crisis, safer at home. And the symptoms that can come out of that can be very similar to those of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, which many of us are familiar with. We've heard the term, at least. It's become much more common in the last 10 years or so. The difference between prolonged duress disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder is that with prolonged duress, they say that there's not a specific trauma involving actual or threatened death or serious injury. Now, the challenge that we have right now is not only do we have that potential of post-traumatic stress disorder happening for people when COVID is over, but we also are in a situation where we are actually under threat. So it's much more likely that any of us could come have the result of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, when all of this is over. Now, there's some good news in this picture, and that is that Doctors Calhoun and Tedeschi have been doing research now for about 15 years or so on something that they call post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth is a positive change experienced as a result of the struggle with a major life crisis or a traumatic event. And the link that you see on the screen is a link that will take you to their research group. Now, what can happen now is that we have the opportunity to do something that can short circuit the potential of that disorder portion of prolonged duress or post-traumatic stress, so that it doesn't have to end up being a disorder situation. It can actually be a growth situation. Now, in their research, Doctors Tedeschi and Calhoun determined that there were several key elements of post-traumatic growth, things that we need to be looking for in order for post-traumatic growth to happen. What they observed is that a vast majority of people actually did come out of traumatic situations with growth, with a better frame of mind, with emotional and psychological health. And so they were very curious as to what was helping to make that happen. Now, one of the things that they found helped to create post-traumatic growth is that people looked at the situation and looked for opportunity. They saw this difficult situation, this struggle, and they said, what can I do with this? What can I do differently with this? What can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? And by having that frame of mind, looking for possibilities, having optimism, having hope, what happened is that people saw opportunities and they pursued those opportunities. The second key element of post-traumatic growth is changes in relationships with others. What they observed is that the people who came out of trauma feeling healthy and strong were people who allowed themselves to get closer in their relationships instead of pulling away. A lot of times after trauma, people are so scared and so traumatized that they don't want to reach out. They're afraid that they're going to be hurt again or something bad will happen. And the folks who looked toward developing their relationships to making them closer were the ones who experienced post-traumatic growth. And they also had an increased sense of connection to others that suffer. And I think we're seeing some really wonderful things about that in our society today. The whole, if any of you happen to watch the event on Saturday night, Together at Home Together or something like that, I forget the exact name of it. It was aired on all of the networks. And we're seeing a lot more empathy happening. People are talking about their concern for other people and their compassion for other people who have suffered. And making that connection, getting closer, allowing ourselves to feel some of that is a key toward post-traumatic growth. Another element of post-traumatic growth is about increased sense of our own strength. When we look at a situation and say, I can do something, I can take action, I can make something happen. Every time we make that step, we're reinforcing our own sense of strength and personal power and choice. And the more that we do that, the stronger we become. And it requires a shift from, oh, woe is me, or this is awful, and the glass is half empty kind of perspective, to looking at what I am doing, what I can do, and also where we can make a difference and contribute. The result of all of that is that people tend to have a greater appreciation for life in general. I have a personal opinion that many of us in our world today have taken a lot of life for granted. Especially here in the United States, many of us have had things pretty nice. We've been pretty blessed. And we tend sometimes to take all that for granted, that we can walk into a grocery store and get food whenever we want, or things like that. And so when we start having a greater appreciation for life, being grateful, that develops post-traumatic growth. And then a deepening of spiritual life, possibly even a significant change in beliefs. One of the things that Calhoun and Tedeschi noticed is that people started experiencing themselves as connected to something greater than themselves, something bigger than who they are, whether that was their support system, other people who were suffering, or their sense of a higher power, that there was some deepening of a spiritual life, and sometimes even significant changes in beliefs from, for example, considering oneself an atheist to considering oneself a Christian. That's just one possible example. There are many, many others where we just see ourselves seeing the world and feeling things in a different way. So when all of these elements come together, the result is that people tend to grow, and instead of deteriorating and having difficulty functioning in the world, always being hypervigilant, always being afraid something bad is going to happen, many of the aspects of post-traumatic stress disorder or prolonged duress stress disorder, we tend instead to see the hope and the positive that might come. So finding a way to practice each of these things, to develop each of these things, is a very important path to growing out of this experience, as opposed to having it be a debilitating experience. Now I have a story for you. Now you might be wondering, why Kopp's custard? Well, this is the way the story goes. Many, many, many years ago, very early in my career, I had a guest staying in my home from Montreal. I had been traveling to and from Canada doing workshops and training programs, and one of my friends came down to Milwaukee to visit with me for a week. And we were in the house, and she was in one room adjacent to the room that I was in, where I happened to be doing my bookkeeping. And I was doing my bookkeeping, and I was talking out loud to myself, and I was saying things like, how am I going to pay the bills? I don't know what I'm going to do. It doesn't look like there's going to be enough money. Forgetting that I had a house guest, I'm speaking out loud all this stuff about my concerns about my financial situation. I was an entrepreneur. It was still pretty new to me. My income was like a roller coaster. So I finished my bookkeeping, and I said to Jasmine, I want to take you to lunch. Let's go to this place called Kopp's. They have custard there, and she had never had custard. So I said, let's go to Kopp's and we'll have custard, and we'll have a burger. They have these amazing burgers. She said, okay. So we drove to Kopp's, and we're standing at the window putting in our order. And I asked, she put in what she wanted, and I put in what I wanted. And I started to take out my wallet to pay the bill. And she said, oh, no, Patricia, no, you don't have to pay for mine. I'll pay for my own. And I said, Jasmine, I just invited you to lunch. Why do you want to pay for your own lunch? What is this about? And she said, well, I heard everything you were saying in the other room this morning, and it looks like you're having a really hard time financially, and I don't want you to have to take care of me too. And I laughed, and I said, I'll explain in a little bit. Let me take care of lunch, and I'll talk to you about it while we eat. And so when we went out to eat, I explained to her that I had developed a habit, a self-care habit. It was one of my resiliency habits. And I said, what I do is I give myself one worry day a month. And so on that day, I get to verbalize out loud, whether there's anybody listening or not, my fears, my worries, my concerns. How am I going to pay the bills? Where am I going to find more business? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? And I just talk out loud all day long and get all my worry out. And then I have a personal rule that for the rest of the month, I don't get to focus on what's wrong. I get to focus on what's right. I get to focus on hope. I get to focus on positivity. But I have my one worry day a month where I can get it all out. And I had forgotten, because that was my assigned worry day when I do my bookkeeping, I had forgotten that she was in the other room listening to me. Well, we both had a pretty good laugh about that. And she understood, and she actually adopted it as one of her tools for resiliency. So that's just one of many tools that can help a person be resilient. And what I'd like to do now is share with you a little bit more about resiliency. And so we can bring that and post-traumatic stress together. So resiliency is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity or trauma or tragedy, whatever kind of problems there might be. And in our case right now, it's the COVID crisis. And it literally means to bounce back from difficult experiences. Now, resiliency isn't something that we're born with. It isn't a personality trait. Resiliency is something that we learn over our lifetime, depending on how we experienced our childhood, what our parents taught us, what our teachers taught us, how we learned to be successful, how much self-efficacy we have in terms of our ability to create results. Anyone can learn resiliency, and that's one of the wonderful things about it when we're looking at post-traumatic growth. So in order to develop resiliency, one of the things people need to look at is caring and support. So what kind of support system do you have around you? Who can you go to when you need someone to talk to? Who's there for you if you ever need physical assistance with something? Who are your friends? Who are your close friends? Who are your not so close friends, but still friends? Who are the people that you've spent time with? Who's the person that you can tell anything to? We need to have a network of caring and support around us in order to be resilient, because when we're down, we need to reach out and have someone help us. And we need to know who those people are. We also need to have an expectation of success. If we really believed that it was truly hopeless, that there was no chance for success, it would be impossible for us to be resilient. We wouldn't bounce back. We would just stay stuck in that doom and gloom. So we have high expectations of success that we can create right now. We can see the world being abundant and healthy, and we know that there's a lot of people out there working on plans and working on treatments for COVID and working on vaccines for COVID. And we have a pretty good expectation of success that we will move through this crisis and make it out on the other side. We also need to have opportunities for meaningful participation. We have to do something. We have to be taking action. Resiliency isn't just a mindset. It's also taking action and making things happen. And so we see the people who are, for example, making masks. A couple weeks ago, before some of the face masks were being made, the cloth face masks were being made by organizations and corporations, there were individuals all over Facebook and Nextdoor and different places saying, I'm going to make masks. I'm going to do something to contribute here. When we can do some kind of contribution that's meaningful, that helps us to be more resilient. We're taking action. We're reinforcing that sense of that we have power and can do something. And we're seeing so many of those things happen. Some days I think I'm seeing more good news than I am seeing bad news when I'm watching the news and they're talking about the good things people are doing. We also need to have positive bonds. We need to be positively connected to people and things around us. So it's not just that caring and support network that we have, but just simply people that we can feel good about hanging out with and things that are positive that we can feel connected to in our world. That could be a garden. It doesn't have to be a person. And we need to have clear and consistent boundaries. Resiliency requires that we have boundaries with ourselves, boundaries for good self-care. Boundaries about what we eat and how we eat and what we drink and how we exercise and all the things that we're doing during this time to take care of ourselves. And then we also need to set positive boundaries with others, clear boundaries. Sometimes we can be in a place where we can listen to another person's pain and difficulty. And sometimes we're not in that place. Sometimes we need to say, I'm not available for that today. I can't do that. Perhaps there's someone else that you could talk to. I really need to take care of myself today. So having clear and consistent boundaries, and then developing all kinds of life skills, things that we feel we have strength in, things that we know we can accomplish. One of my favorite things to do about resiliency is to ask people to make a list of 100 skills that they have in their life. And people will go, well, you have 100 skills. I don't have 100 skills. What do you mean 100 skills? And what happens is people usually get to about 15 or 20 and they get kind of stuck. And then I prod them a little bit with a few more things and then they can get a few more. And it's something I challenge you to do. What are the skills that you have that actually could be used during this time to take care of you, to take care of the people around you, to help contribute to others, to help create a successful outcome here? The more skills you know you have, the more resilient you feel, and the more likely you are to use those skills if you've named them. So the link at the bottom of your screen right now is a link to some great articles and resources about resiliency and a quiz that you can take to test your own resiliency, something you might want to share with others. Not long ago, Jeff Bezos quoted to all of us in a news interview, he quoted Dr. Seuss. And I just loved this quote, so I had to share it with you. When something bad happens, you have three choices. You can either let it define you, let it destroy you, or you can let it strengthen you. We have choices right now. We can make choices that will make a difference in our world. You can choose trauma. You can choose prolonged duress stress disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder, or you can choose transformation. If you work toward post-traumatic growth, if you work toward building resiliency, you can come out of this stronger, healthier, more playful, more connected, and more alive. And that's our goal with doing this webinar and the workshops that we're offering through UWM, is to support our community during this COVID crisis so that we can come through this to play together, to work together, and to thrive together. Now, you will be getting a resources document and some more information about UWM classes that will be emailed to you after this presentation. I know Javon has some things to offer at this time, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. Javon?
Yeah, we will open it up to Q&A right away, Patricia, if that concludes the presentation portion.
Yes.
Okay. So again, people, please shoot your questions to us. There is a Q&A section at the bottom middle portion of your screen. You can also ask questions via Facebook, and we have moderators who will help us navigate through those questions. So far, we don't have anything.
No questions?
Not as of yet. Maybe you explained it so thoroughly and so well, huh?
Javon, there was one question in the Q&A regarding the materials afterwards.
So that was a question. I did respond to that individual. If that is a question, I can ask for the larger group. There was a question about it being recorded and if they can have access to the video following the presentation. That will be accessible. We will have that to send out for those who were registered. I will double check with Kara on how we will share that via the Facebook Live event.
There is a question coming in now saying, great presentation. How do you see resilience and PTG overlapping?
Well, they walk hand in hand. Post-traumatic growth is the result of what happens when we use our resiliency skills. And so we can start building those skills if we don't have them or aren't consciously aware of them. We can acknowledge them and start to strengthen them or start to build them. And the result of doing that is post-traumatic growth instead of post-traumatic distress or prolonged duress.
All right, we have another question regarding if the slides will be made available. I did touch on that in the beginning. For those who may have joined later, we will be sharing the information that's presented today in a follow-up email concluding today's presentation.
Looks like we have another question from Facebook. And the question is, how are you seeing this being used in the workplace?
Well, I think that employers need to understand post-traumatic growth and resiliency. There are a lot of things that employers can be doing in the workplace. I don't know if any of them are, if they're even focused on that. But for example, so we have the idea of skills. So in the workplace, what could be happening is an opportunity if people are in the workplace, you know, working in an environment together as opposed to working from home, the opportunity could be given to them to share skills that they have, to talk about successes that they've had, to make suggestions for each other, to do fun things, to contribute to each other. All of those things are elements of resiliency. And so if we practice that, then we can build post-traumatic growth. An example of that is one of the things I've seen on some of the newscasts is in one of the hospitals in New York, every time a patient is discharged because they're now healthy and they can go home, there's a Beatles song that they play, and I forget what, Here Comes the Sun. And they play the song through the hospital loudspeakers. So everybody knows somebody's going home and everyone can celebrate. And they stand in the hallways and they clap and they celebrate that this person has left. And that's a way of having connection. It's a way of positivity and making positive bonds. It's a way of compassion. It's a way of providing hope to other people. All of those things are elements of post-traumatic growth and resiliency. So it was a brilliant idea on the part of someone to share that song with everybody when someone goes home. So there are resources available on the web about resiliency in the workplace. I don't have access to that web link instantly right now, but I can add it to the resource page that's going to be sent out to everybody after the workshop.
Okay, Patricia, we have another question from Facebook. How can parents help kids?
Oh, there's so many ways that they can help the children. And it's about consciously acknowledging what skills those children are building and helping them to see positive things in the face of all of it. Oh gosh, how could I go into specifics? Let's see. Well, one example is that I've seen in some of the newscasts is parents who have had their children make signs for the healthcare workers. So teaching the children to be grateful for support, that support is important and support is necessary. And these are the people who are supporting us. And we need to be thankful to those people. And here's how we can be thankful. That hits several elements of resiliency. There are some very, very good websites on building resiliency in children. So a simple Google search on resiliency in children would bring up a whole bunch of resources. Inspiring Kindness website has some great stuff for resiliency in children. Heartmath.com has some good stuff for resiliency in children. Anything else? Any other questions?
Yes, Patricia, here's another one from Facebook. It goes along the same lines with the kids. It says, I have a daughter who is a senior in high school. She is so sad about the unknown of graduation ceremony and her future plans. Encouraging words for her?
Oh, encouraging words for her are that celebration will have a time and a place to do something special at some point. Hopefully the schools will have some kind of ceremony that will happen, even if it is in August or September, but they'll still do some kind of ceremony. You can do some kind of ceremony at home to at least acknowledge that turning point, that very, very important life milestone, to have her talk about how she would like to celebrate it and what she could do later that she can't do right now. Is there any way that she can do some sort of celebration right now? So creating a positive future, something to look forward to, something that she can do right now. And also just the reassurance that she's not alone. I know that that might sound a little bit strange, but she's not alone. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands probably of high school seniors, college folks who didn't get their graduation ceremony this year. And it's to know that you're not alone and that there are others who have that same feeling can sometimes help as well. And the other thing is, let it be okay for her to be sad. If she wants to cry about it, let her cry about it and don't try to talk her out of crying. If she wants to be angry about it, let her be angry about it and let her all she wants, saying all that and getting it out rather than attempting to deny it or control it or suppress it. Moving that energy in motion, that is her emotion, letting her move that through and in an unconditional way, just witness it for her and say, yeah, I get it. And if I had lost my high school graduation, I'd be pretty stuck too. and to just let her feel, let her acknowledge that what she's feeling is okay and it fits the circumstance. I hope that's helpful.
Okay, we have another question. Could this crisis lead to collective post-traumatic growth? What would that potentially look like?
Well, I think that there's a lot of people who are working toward making that happen. I don't know that they all realize that or would call it post-traumatic growth, but I'm hearing the call through newscasts and interviews and so on for people who are saying, this is a time for change. This is a time, we have an opportunity right now to build it better, to build it different. Let's not go back to where we were. Even though there was a lot of good about it, let's not go back to where we were, because now we can see that weren't working. We can see some things that could be a whole lot better. So let's take this and figure out how can we do it better as we move out of this. Not just how are we going to fix it, not go back to what was, but how are we going to build it better? And if we do that, and we involve as many people as possible at different levels, and people have an opportunity to contribute to that, we will in fact create post-traumatic growth out of this. And we can avoid some of the mental health problems that people might have had if our attitude was not as positive, or if we weren't as active toward being resilient and building better.
Okay, Patricia, we have another question. Can we also grieve, being that we miss our social life and our old lifestyles?
Absolutely. Grieving is really important. It's just like what I was saying about the girl who didn't get her graduation. If she's sad, she needs to be sad. I have had moments where I just have tears, and I'm not even sure why I have tears. But I just have tears, and so I let myself cry. We have lost something. We have lost a very big something as a result of this, and we will not get that back. It will be different. And because we're not going to get it back, we will grieve. There's been great loss. And so if you feel like crying, just let yourself cry. I'll tell you a quick story, another one that's kind of fun for me. A friend of mine told me she moved away from home to another state to start a new life. And she was feeling kind of sad and missing her family. And she hadn't made a lot of new friends yet. And she was pushing her grocery store cart through the aisle, and she was walking down the aisle, and she had this big wave of sadness, and the tears just came, and she didn't even understand why she was crying at that moment. And she said this other little old lady came around the corner pushing her cart and looked up at her and said, "It's okay, sweetheart. I was crying in the vegetables." And what my friend realized is that, one, her tears and her grieving were more acceptable to others than she thought. And secondly, she looked at where she was standing, and she was in the snack aisle. And there was a particular snack that she would always take to the potlucks and to the events that her family would have when she was back at home in another state. And it was just seeing that out of the corner of her eye that activated that whole wave of grief. So you may not know why you're grieving. We all have a lot to grieve. And so I hope that you will let yourself cry when the tears are there, and know that almost all folks will have compassion for those tears, and have compassion for yourself. The more we let it just flow, the easier it becomes. From the world of emotional intelligence, they say that if you really let yourself feel a feeling in the moment, it will pass in 6 seconds to a couple of minutes. That feeling will pass if you just simply let yourself feel it. Thank you.
Okay, Patricia, this next one is kind of follow up to the question regarding the young lady without the graduation. Is how do you find the balance between validating an individual's feelings about the loss of a life event and reassuring them they are not alone?
How do you find the balance? I'm not sure that balance would be the word I would use, and I'm thinking about what the question is about. So if you want, how much of each do you do, or what do you do? My experience is that when you allow people the space to feel their feelings, they don't get stuck in them and they don't wallow in them. And so if you can allow the space for those feelings to occur, and don't try to reassure her that she's not alone, or reassure someone that it's going to be okay. Don't try to do that when they're in the middle of the feeling. Let them just simply feel the feeling. Just be with them. Offer them a Kleenex if you want to, but just be with them. And if anything, you might say, I'm here. I got you. I'm staying with you. I'm here. It's okay. It's okay to cry. And then when all that's over, when the sadness is over or the anger is over, that's when you then say, okay, so now there's a whole lot of other people in this boat too. What do you suppose we could do about this? Where could we go with this? What could we make happen? What can we do for you? What can we do to include others? So they need to be separate. They can be one after the other, or they could leapfrog, they could be sad, and then there's some reassurance, and then there's another wave of sadness, and then there's some more reassurance, but allow that flow to happen. And it can be a fairly natural process. Anything else?
Yes. What additional resources would you recommend for early childhood educators for when children return to the classroom, birth to 5 years, help kids return to classrooms?
Oh my goodness. What resources or what ideas?
What additional resources would you recommend for early childhood educators for when children return to classrooms, in particular birth to 5 years?
Yeah.
To help the children return.
There are some very good resources on mindfulness and also trauma-informed classrooms that could be very, very helpful for that. So I would do, if you want to do a Google search, Google trauma-informed schools, and you will find things at all different levels of schools. Look up mindfulness in schools and some of the tools that are there. Believe it or not, mindfulness things can happen with extremely young children. So you can begin teaching them things sometimes as early as 2-3 years old in terms of mindfulness. They don't understand the concept, but they understand and can experience the activity. So those are the two areas I would go to: trauma-informed schools, early childhood, and mindfulness in schools, early childhood, and do those as a Google search, and you should find a lot.
All right, we have another question from Facebook, Patricia. It's a comment/question. It says, thank you so much for this. This was great. What low barrier suggestions or resources do you have for building resiliency for underserved populations during this time?
Oh my goodness, big question. That's one that I don't have a simple, easy response to in terms of pulling things out of the, this ages me, the Rolodex in my mind. Wow. I know that there's some things out there. We have such an extensive bibliography of information and web links and books and so on for the trauma counseling program that includes cultural differences and underserved populations and things of that nature. And I apologize, I can't pull anything out quickly, just a single thing out at this time. I can take a look, see what I can find, maybe get back to you if we have an email to do so.
So if there aren't any other questions coming in, it looks as though this may wrap up the Q&A portion of tonight's webinar. Patricia, do you have any last thoughts or comments that you would like to share with everyone?
Just want to let everybody know that we did put together a 2-hour class that will go deeper into post-traumatic growth and Resiliency. And so if you're interested, we've discounted the price on it to make it easier for people during this time, because we know finances are tight for everybody. So there'll be information about that in the email that we'll send to you. And then there are also full day classes on post-traumatic growth and resiliency, on preventing secondary trauma, on trauma-informed care. UWM is so wonderful that we have just such a great trauma program available to you. So I encourage you, when you get that email with the resource list and links to take you into UWM's website to find the dates for those workshops and everything, to follow through, take a look. And I also encourage you to take the recording of this webinar and share it. We purposefully did it this way so that it could be shared with as many people as possible. Make it viral if you want to. Just the idea that more and more people understand that we can focus on post-traumatic growth and building resiliency, that will help make a difference in how, in the outcome that we all have from this experience. So I look forward to hearing from some of you again, to have an opportunity to share with you. Thank you for caring enough to take the time tonight to hear about how we can make our community healthier mentally as well as physically. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Patricia. We would like to thank you for imparting your wisdom and knowledge on us today during the webinar. We would also like to thank all of those who participated in today's webinar. And I would personally like to thank all of the many hands that were involved in creating and putting this thing together. It really was a nice crowd, and we really enjoyed it. So thank you all very much. And with that, I would just encourage everyone to be safe and be well. Until next time.
Bye.